Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by a USA Today best-selling author of over a dozen books, including his most recent novel, which just came out this past Tuesday, Three Hitmen and a Baby. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Rob Hart. Rob, how the heck are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
Did you ever at one point consider going by Robert? And the only reason I ask is because a shorter name obviously means your name is bigger on the title. I don't know if that ever kind of stuck in the back of your head of like, oh, I'll go with a shorter name so they can make my, name bigger on the book cover.
I've always gone by Rob, even since I was a kid. And I think part of it is because I always associated if I was hearing my full name, if my mom or my dad was calling me Robert, that meant I was in trouble. So I've steered clear the best that I can. But I've never thought of it in those terms. And I think you're right. Keeping it short and simple means that the name gets to be bigger on the cover.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, at least for me, my dad's a Robert as well. I'm not a junior or anything. We have different middle names, but he was always Bob, and so I would go by Rob too. But for whatever reason, starting out, I just felt like, you know, a full name seemed more professional for me. But in retrospect, well, I have a long last name too. You have a nice short name, so for short, I mean, again, yeah, it's great for marketing purposes. But
Yeah.
anyway, the way I usually like to start these off is discuss. Well, actually, you have a Wikipedia, and usually when an author or somebody I chat with has a Wikipedia, I like to do like a Rich Eisen celebrity true or false, and see what's on here if this is all accurate. So,
Yeah, I think it's like a little out of date and a little janky, but it's also like having a Wikipedia page. My friend once described when you're an author, it's like the internet equivalent of riding in a limo. It's just so fancy.
it is fancy. Let's see here. Let's go back actually to I was reading your bio here in for the warehouse, which we're going to discuss in a little bit. In addition to being, an author, you were a book publisher, a political reporter, a communications director for a politician, and a commissioner for the city of New York. What does
Yep.
that entail, being a commissioner for the city of New York? Is it
So
like
so
Sin?
that
Is it like Spin City?
it is so this was an honorary position that I took. It was unpaid, but every I think 10 years the city council needs to redistrict, which they figure out how voting demographics have changed and how populations have changed and how to redraw the lines for the city council seats. And the city council speaker at the time, Chris Quinn, asked me to be on it because I was from Staten Island. They needed a representative from Staten Island. And she was on track to become the city's next mayor. So I was like, oh, I'm absolutely going to do this because then the mayor owes me a favor. And that's just not a bad thing to have in your back pocket, especially
Yeah.
someone like me who is really good at making bad decisions. And then Bill de Blasio won, which, was kind of like a shocker. And it was a huge bummer for me because it was just such a miserable experience because I would just have to go and sit in like auditoriums and get screamed at by people for 3 hours who didn't understand how the redistricting process worked. So at the end of the day, it looks so fancy to like put it in a bio, and it's like utterly meaningless. I didn't do anything of like real import.
And to think, had she won, that groundhog probably would still be alive today.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, she wouldn't have dropped the groundhog.
It's a shame. So, at what point do you remember the very first creative thing you did, whether it was a story, poem, drawing? I don't know, how old you were when you kind of probably did that very first creative thing?
I mean, I was always an active little artist. Even when I was a little kid, I drew all the time. And I went into college actually thinking I was going to be a graphic design major. I got into SUNY Purchase, which is a pretty prestigious art conservatory, and then did that for a semester and realized I hated it. And I had done a lot of writing too when I was younger. I had a teacher who really encouraged me in like the seventh grade, Mrs. Knoll, who always really, really loved like she would give us compositions every week. So we were basically writing like little 3-page essays or stories every week. And she loved mine, and she was always very complimentary. And I was when I was in high school, I interned at a local newspaper. So I was always very artistically inclined, and I thought I was going to go one way, and then I ended up kind of like going the other way.
So what was the initial dream like in high school? Like, what did you initially think your career path was going to be then? Was it not writing?
Yeah, I thought I was going to be a comic book artist and do graphic design work and stuff like that. And when I got into that environment, I realized it wasn't for me. You know, it's like sometimes you need to immerse yourself in it to realize that your relationship to it is different than you thought. Because when I was doing it casually, through high school, through grammar school, and I took like art classes and lessons and all this stuff, and I really, really enjoyed it. When I was in a space where it was like, oh, you have to do this to get a passing grade, and I'd be like, but I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to draw a tree. I want to draw a bowl of fruit, like whatever. And it just didn't click for me. And at the same time, I was like, yeah, man, I really like this writing stuff. Maybe I should give this a shot. And as soon as I started doing that, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is where I belong.
Do you remember then like the very first short story you wrote? Like was it always, I guess for me, you obviously genre hop, which a lot of writers do. I primarily see you though more as like crime thriller because you've written some like sci-fi, whatever else. But
Yeah.
your earlier stuff was more like, crime and I would say, the Assassins Anonymous stuff is, crime thriller. Did you like what were you reading around that time? I mean, did you initially kind of like were those the stories that you started writing, or had you been dabbling in some maybe other genre?
Well, I guess I started in crime and mystery because the first books I read were like Encyclopedia Brown and then the Hardy Boys. But then I got my love of genre hopping because my mom started giving me Dean Koontz books when I was in the eighth grade, which I was way too young to be reading at that point. Those were way inappropriate for me. But I really, really loved them, and I appreciated just the madness of he's basically like Kmart Stephen King. And then when the first book that made me think, oh, maybe I should do this, is was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which is a masterpiece and is a great book. Uh, but yeah, initially when I first started out, I was kind of writing, I guess, more literary stuff, mostly because I had started reading Chuck Palahniuk's work and then getting into a lot of the stuff that he was teaching because his style felt really good to me. I really liked it because he does like the minimalism style, which was sort of like established by like Gordon Lish and then picked up by people like Amy Hempel and Tom Spanbauer. So there were a lot of things that I really appreciated about that, and it also felt like it kind of dovetailed well with some of like the crime fiction stuff I was reading, like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. So I just started really writing literary stuff in the beginning, just but that was more at that point I was trying to find my voice and like figure out how to actually write a story. And it was as I started to focus more on the crime genre itself, I learned how to, actually get out of the way of the writing part and just tell a story.
Were you submitting any of those more, quote unquote literary stories? Like at what point did you realize, oh, there are places that will actually publish these stories?
Yeah, there were two that I got published early on. One was Helix Literary Magazine, and one was a website called Dogmatica. And Helix is still around. I don't know if Dogmatica still is. And those were both very literary stories, and they were fun. But it wasn't until I started doing the crime stuff that it was like, oh, this is really fun.
And then at what point did you start? So your very first, at least published novel was New York, the first
Yeah,
Ash McKenna story or novel. Was that your first like novel or just the first published novel?
first published. I have a very, very garbage, I guess you can call it speculative, literary, sci-fi, something or other that I wrote that is just the worst piece of trash imaginable. But look, I teach. Like we were talking about before. Next week, I'm going to Western Pennsylvania because I teach in an MFA program, and the thing that I explain to students a lot is sometimes you got to burn one out of your system, and it's the book that you're learning your process, you're finding your voice, but you're also emulating all the authors that you admire. So you don't actually have that point of view yet. And there's one sole copy, like printed copy of this book left, and it's sitting in my filing cabinet, and there are instructions in my will to destroy it upon my death. Like, I'm not kidding. It literally says that it should not be published, it should be burned. I just like to flip through it every now and again. It's sometimes like I'll stumble across it and like go through it and be like, oh wow, like this is embarrassing. But oh hey, that line was pretty good. So but it's nice to see how far I've come. So it's a great memento. But after what happened with Go Set a Watchman, not that I'm comparing myself to Harper Lee, but just do not want to see someone try to put that out to make a buck.
Um, Do you remember like, well, because yeah, you said that you've looked at it somewhat recently. Was like, how was it written? Was it written first person, third person, present, past tense?
First person, I think it was present. I tend to skew toward first person present a lot. Like
Well, yeah,
that's
that was
just kind
something
of
I
my
wanted to
wheelhouse.
discuss. It seems like a
Yeah.
lot of your novels, not all of them, but the good majority of the novels, you seem very comfortable with first person present tense voice.
Yeah,
Is there a specific reason why? Because I'll be honest with you. I feel like nowadays it's much more widely accepted in more genre fiction as opposed to literary. And I guess at the time you said you had also been reading a lot of literary too. But I mean, if we're talking about like maybe even a decade ago, I remember like Hank Phillippi Ryan said like her first novel was first person present tense, and that was even longer ago. And at that point, it was very unheard of to have a lot of like more genre novels kind of written in that way. So I was just curious, like, what really spoke to you to kind of feel like, okay, this is because, I'm going to do first person present tense.
it's funny. I don't know that I ever consciously made that decision. It was just what was comfortable to me, and part of it is I think that that was a very common narrative device for like minimalism and the things that I was really immersing myself in at the time because it makes the story feel more personal. It makes it feel like there are, there's a strong. It feels like I can form a stronger bond with the voice and with the character when I'm reading first person. It was the first time I wrote third person for a book was The Warehouse, and it took me a little while to get into that group. I think I had to do a couple of short stories in third person first, just to kind of find some comfort level there.
Yeah. Well, let's keep still on the Ash McKenna stuff. So your first novel was that initially just going to be like a standalone, or from the very jump you realized, okay, I can make this into a series. This is going to be book one.
I think I considered it to be a standalone when I mean, it took me 5 years to write it. So in all that time, I wasn't thinking I can't wait to get to the second one. I
Right.
was thinking I can't wait to finish this one and actually like produce a good book. And it was when it got picked up by Polis Books that I think the conversation started like, oh, this is pretty cool. And, maybe you could do another installment because this character could probably carry another one. And, the first book took me 5 years. The second book took me 9 months because at that point I had a process and I felt a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, it was not necessarily something I conceived of. Like, I don't even think I was thinking beyond that book at any point, like what else I might be doing. I mean, like now I'm sitting in I've got 4 or 5 projects on the back burner that I know I want to get to one day. Whereas with that, it was just so head down and focused of just, I just got to finish this thing. I got to prove to myself that I can actually write a publishable book.
Yeah. And I think there are six of those novels, correct? So
Five,
what?
five.
Oh,
So I
five?
did, yeah, I did 5 in the series, and then Takeout was a short story collection.
Oh, I see. I
Yep.
see. Huh. Well, they had to update your Wikipedia. They have New York, Bad Beat, City of Rose, South Village, The Woman from Prague,
Oh,
and
so
Potter's
Bad
Field.
Beat. Bad Beat was me and Alex Segura did a digital only novella for Polis since because we were both at the same publisher,
Oh, I see.
where
I see.
my character and his
The
character
characters
Pete
meet type thing.
Fernandez, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I man, I completely I forget about that sometimes because again it was digital only and it's been gone for
Yeah.
so long that it's like, oh yeah, that was the thing that we also wrote.
Well, and we're going to talk a little bit about your relationship with Alex. And I know you guys have a book that came out somewhat recently. So, okay, so you started, a second book, a third book. Like when we were I saw you at BoucherCon, not last year, but I think the previous year, and we talked briefly. And I think you said with like the Assassins books, like you could write like 20 books. You know what I mean? Like at the time with the Ash McKenna series, did you have at least a number in your head? Like, okay, I think maybe I can might get like 5 books out of this series, or was it just kind of book by book? Like, I guess, would you ever return to the series?
Probably no. So the books are out of print now because Polis closed, and I got my rights back, and I chose not to. There was a publisher who kind of like picked up all of the Polis books in a fire sale, and I chose not to participate in that. In part because the Ash books are currently being developed for TV, and there's a really, really incredible creative team working on it. The pilot script is phenomenal. They completely reimagine it, but still keep the spirit of it. So it like I'm thrilled by it. So to a degree, it's a lottery ticket. It's, I want to sit on, if the TV show happens, the books are going to be worth a lot more. And then I can like
Yeah.
give them to a publisher and make some nice money and, buy fancy things for the kids. Uh, but also I was holding back because a lot of publishers now, if they take your backlist, they do want an additional entry in the series. Like I think Alex Segura experienced this, where like he wanted to get the Pete Fernandez books back out, and everyone was like, "Well, where's book number six?" And he's like, "I don't want to write book number six." And he finally made it work. Where I think Thomas and Mercer is doing them, and he's doing a new book that's unrelated to the series. But at the end of the day, I just like I don't want to do another Ash book right now. Like maybe in 10 years, I might have an idea or might find my way back to the character. Or if the TV show happens, maybe the TV show happens and it's a huge smash and people love this character and it's like, okay, cool, I'll reevaluate it.
Yeah.
But I felt very much like I put that to bed. So I don't feel inclined to go back.
Yeah. Going back to your Wikipedia, at what point were you a publisher at Mysterious Press?
So that was I was I worked for a politician for a number of years as a communications director, and then burnt myself out on that because that was a carrying two cell phones and working 24/7 kind of job, and I realized I'm
Yeah.
never going to be able to be a writer if I am doing nothing but working for this guy. So I quit and I took a pay cut to work at Mysterious Press, which was owned by Otto Penzler, run out of the Mysterious Bookshop, and he had started a digital imprint where they were taking old school crime and mystery books and bringing them back as ebooks if print was prohibitive, which in a lot of cases at that time it was. So we had some cool stuff. We had some of James Ellroy's books. We had like some older classics like Dorothy Hughes and Charlotte Armstrong, James M. Cain. We ended up doing some Paul Kane stuff. Like we had some really really cool stuff, and I did that for years, and it was really great because I was able to immerse myself in the publishing world a little bit more. I was able to learn how it worked from both sides, which I think has really helped me as a writer because sometimes things will happen that might otherwise be frustrating if you don't understand why it's happening. But I can kind of look at it dispassionately and say, okay, cool. Like from a business perspective, I kind of get it. But I think I did that for like 7 or 8 years. And then when the warehouse came out, it was like, oh, cool. Like I am now making enough money. I could be a full-time writer. I'm going to go do that. And best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I do want to get into the warehouse. Before that, though, the last thing I think I'm going to talk about here on your Wikipedia, the last safe place.
Yes.
That looks to be at least listed as like your first book, which was like a standalone novella.
Yes. So fun thing about that was a zombie novella that I set on Governor's Island because I love Governor's Island in New York. It's just such a weird, quirky little place. It's like it was an old like Revolutionary War fort. It's like an island right between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Then it became a Coast Guard installation, and now it's a park. And 20 years ago, it was really creepy because you would walk around and there were like apartment buildings and houses and all this stuff that had been abandoned. So it felt like vaguely apocalyptic, but also like just really, really, really fun and weird to explore. And over the years, they've been rehabilitating it. They took down the apartment buildings. They are putting new facilities on it. And it's like cool. It's starting to lose some of its character, which bums me out. But I did this novella and I self-published it. And it was really an experiment to learn about the self-publishing process. I wanted to understand how to work with KDP, how to submit books in, how to code an ebook, all that stuff. So I was very, very happy with how that worked in terms of what I learned. And then I took the book down after, I mean, probably sold like 500 copies or something. And then I will be announcing soon that a very cool press that I've been wanting to work with for a very long time is re-releasing it soon, and it's going to be an updated and expanded version. I'm going to
Nice.
go back and do some edits on it and update it a little bit, and it'll have a new title and a new cover, and it'll come out both in print and digital, which I'm very excited about. Because that's the real challenge with novella stuff is that a lot of publishers will not do novellas because it's just not always worth the cost. But
Yeah.
this publisher is very comfortable with that format, and yeah, I'm excited about it coming back out into print.
Yeah, well, let's talk after because I think I know which press it is because I know that they're starting to do a big push. Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of novellas, kind of jumping ahead here, but you did one of the book shots with Patterson. which was kind of the idea about let's get a lot of thriller novellas out there. Um, was that the first? Now you've since collaborated with a lot of other people, and I know I've talked to a lot of other writers. I know the Patterson is not necessarily a traditional collaboration type process, but like, was that the first kind of quote unquote collaboration that you did? And can you talk a little bit about that experience?
I can't remember if I did the thing with Segura first or the thing with Patterson first. Maybe they were around the same time. But it was definitely, toward the beginning of my experience with that kind of format. And I thought it was great. I mean, look, like I didn't have a lot of contact with him. I was mostly working through an editor. A lot of the notes that he gave me were incredible. I don't have a ton of patience for people who are like hypercritical of James Patterson.
Oh, I love
It's like
Patterson. He's a
because
beast.
here's well, look, if it, you don't have to like it. If you don't like it, that's okay. There's nothing wrong. But at the end of the day, first off, he knows more than I do because he sold a lot more books. Second off, he really does a lot to uplift writers and bookstores and libraries and donates a lot of money and a lot of his time. Like he's a pretty good dude. So it was really great to work with him, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. The Bookshots program ultimately was a failure because the idea was we'll put out novella length books, so like 30,000 words, and then like people will buy more books to read. Like this is great. And then people were not interested in, buying four novellas a month. And then bookstores couldn't turn over that much stock. They were like, we can't do this. Like you're giving us a new title every week. Like this is ridiculous. So they ended up pulling the plug on the program. They put mine out as digital. It was supposed to be digital in print, and I didn't get the print, and I was a little bummed about that. But, I've also met people who, when I tell them about the program, they're like, oh, I read this really cool book called Scot Free. And I'm like, yeah, that's the one that I wrote. And so that's always a fun little thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Patterson. I mean, like any author, I mean, he's written some really great books and some other, not so great books, but
Yeah,
he works so hard. I mean, people like to talk shit and say like, oh, it's just whatever. But I know another writer who had done a novella, and he turned it in and figured like, oh, it's going to be weeks before I hear anything. And he said like within a day, he got all these notes back from
yeah,
Patterson on things.
yeah.
So, but all right, so that's cool. So you talked before about just kind of the process. How has your writing process changed at all since that very first trunk novel? Like, are you somebody, I always hate the term, but like, pantser, plotter, hybrid? I mean, like how have you like how'd that start? And then like with this most recent novel that you've been working on that you turned into your publisher, is it, like how have you found your groove? Has it stayed the same? Has it changed at all?
I would say it changes with every book because, I'm always growing and I'm always learning new things. And there's always areas where I might feel more confidence than I did previously, or areas where I say, okay, this is a weakness and I need to, really step this part up. But I will say, the whole plotter versus pantser thing is like sorting hat bullshit. Like I hate it. I honestly, I truly, truly believe that some people can pants, but it is a very, very, very rare talent. I only know a few authors who do it successfully. Like Hank Philippi Ryan does it. Jordan Harper does it. I think like two or three more people who I know who work on the professional level. And I have this issue at the MFA program where I teach, where everyone wants to have their little sorting hat moment of like, I'm a plotter, I'm a pantser, I'm in this house, I'm in that house. And it's invariably the people who are the pantsers who they get halfway through the degree and they realize like, shit, I should have planned this out a little bit better. Because especially when you don't know the mechanics or how to tell a story yet, you need to have some kind of guidepost. You need to have some kind of like map. And look, like if you can do it without that, like more power to you. But again, based on a lot of experience in talking to a lot of writers, I find that the pantsers are always the ones who kind of regret it by the end, you know.
Yeah.
And they talk about how like, oh well, there's no joy of discovery. It's like I outline my novels and I still discover great things. There are times where there was in Assassin's Anonymous, there was an entire section that I hadn't planned for that was just like turned into a little side quest that I didn't know if it was going to work, and I explored it. It was super fun, and I kept it in, and I was really happy with it. There's times where I've done that where it hasn't worked out, but for the most part, I think that you can still have your cake and eat it too. But yeah, the ability to write a book without a roadmap, I think, is exceedingly difficult.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the warehouse. So you had been working on the Ash McKenna books. At what point did you decide, I guess, to branch out, or did you decide to maybe like put a pin in that series and the warehouse? Because I mean, looking at the other books you had done, the warehouse completely different than anything you had done before, which is probably one of the
Yeah,
reasons it had been, it was a big sell for you. There was movie rights. And then, of course, there was the follow-up you had with the publisher, Paradox Hotel, which I guess these are more speculative, you would say, sci-fi as opposed to the crime. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
at what point did you decide, I mean, because that can be scary sometimes when you decide, to go in a completely different direction.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it scary. It was definitely an adjustment. I mean, The Warehouse came out in 2019. I got the idea for it in 2012. So that's the New York came out in 2015. I had that idea like sitting in my back pocket for a very long time. It was based on an article that I read, and I was like, "Oh, there's a book here." But I wasn't a good enough writer to do it because it was a big, complicated book. So I was glad to have done the Ash books first, just to kind of like learn my process and learn how to tell a story. And then it finally got to a point where I think I said to myself, if I don't write this book soon, someone else will, and then I'm going to hate myself. So I need to get moving on it. So it was around when I was finishing the Ash series out. I was probably working on like the fourth book, and then I think started working on the Warehouse just to kind of feel it out. And yeah, I really started working on it in earnest around 2017, 2018. And so then we sold it pretty quickly after my agent took it out. And yeah, it just felt like a natural evolution for me. It was like, okay, like I was able to pull off this 5 book series. I was able to, move it to different locations, but keep a consistent tone. I felt really good about how it worked out. And so at that point, I was just ready to challenge myself, and I wanted to do something that was harder. And I honestly, I thought the book was unpublishable. I thought no one was going to take it. I thought if I was lucky, like a small press, like a little like punk rock publisher would take it because it's like, it's an anti-Amazon book and no one wants to bite the bear. And then, it went beyond my expectations. Like I remember when my agent first read it, he's like, "Man, this is going to sell big." And I was like, "Do I have a bad agent? Like, does he know what he's talking about?" And he was completely right. Like we went to auction and then it went to preempt. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, having been with Polis, I mean, essentially, Polis, I mean, I don't know if we want to how we want to classify it, but it was a smaller press compared to Crown. I mean, it's essentially just Random House where it's I mean, was it in a way, I mean, you had been working in publishing, but in a way was it kind of culture shock? Because I feel like sometimes writers especially writers who have like kind of published on one level and then they go to another level, like it can be a culture shock sometimes. I mean, I'm assuming you kind of knew what to expect going into it because you had already been kind of working in publishing, and at that point, what, this was your fifth or sixth novel that was published. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you kind of like knew what you were getting into and kind of like expectations, right?
Yes and no. I think there were definitely things that I was able to plan for. I was definitely, I mean, look, like Polis was good and bad because as a press, as a small press, it punched above its weight. But Jason also made a lot of mistakes, and he was a one-man show who, a lot of things didn't get done when they were supposed to get done. So I was doing a lot of the stuff on my own. And then if I wanted to go out on tour, I was paying for it myself. A lot of the promo stuff I was chasing down. And then all of a sudden, I've got a team. I've got people. And they're like, I'm filling out like my author questionnaire. And it's like, when we book you on an airplane, do you prefer a window seat or an aisle seat? And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Aisle seat, please. Um, so it was definitely a change in what I was used to in the sense that I still felt like I need to be doing all these things. I needed to learn to trust the people I was working with because they're all smart professionals, but I'm just so used to handling everything on my own. And I was lucky in that the one person that I hooked up with immediately and was really really kind to me was Blake Crouch because we had the same
Mm.
editor, Julian Pevia. And I remember I had known Blake from the conventions. I knew his partner Jackie because we were friendly. And then after the deal was made, I remember seeing Blake really shortly after that, and he was like, he's like, "Come with me, young Padawan. Like, I'll help." And was kind of like talking me through some stuff, and he was incredibly helpful. So I will always be thankful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Blake. Blake's career trajectory where he had, those crime novels with I guess Minotaur or something like that, you know what I mean? And then basically then he had like he couldn't self, he had to self-publish his one book because he couldn't sell it, and then Pines happened, and then he got the TV deal, and then Dark Matter, and then now he's freaking show running season two of Dark Matter, and so yeah,
Yep.
and that's just how publishing is. I mean, there's always ups and downs. You can never anticipate anything. You can never predict things. Um, but well, speaking of which, I mean, you've been kind of open about this, so I think you're probably okay to talk about it. I mean, The Warehouse and the Paradox Hotel, they didn't do as well as I guess the publisher necessarily had hoped, right? And so at that
No,
point,
no.
when you wrote this, and unfortunately in publishing, sales numbers follow writers, and sometimes it's hard to get another deal because they'll be like, well, your last book, blah blah blah. So at what point did you then kind of transition to saying, where this book came about? Because I mean, your dedication. Do you remember what your dedication is in this
I
book?
do. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're like,
This
yeah,
one's for
this
me.
is for me. So yeah, what can you talk about kind of like going from those, again, those kind of sci-fi speculative books to essentially crime thriller with humor in it?
Yeah. So Warehouse and Paradox, I got paid a disgusting amount of money for between US publishing deals and foreign publishing deals. I made close to $2 million on those two books. It was insane. And they did not sell the way that they should have anywhere, in any country, which was kind of wild because I remember my agent had gone to the London Book Fair like a couple of years after The Warehouse came out and just didn't perform to expectations. And he was talking to all these publishers who had paid like really, really big money for it from different countries, and they were like, "We don't get it. We don't get it. Everything was right. Everything that happened that was supposed to happen happened. We would still do the same deal today. We just don't get it." And I remember saying to him, like, it's really hard for me to hear that and not, not hear that I was like an almost unmitigated failure. So thank you. But yeah, it didn't sell the copies it needed to sell, and that was a bummer. And they both were in development for film and TV, and neither of it worked out. I mean, The Warehouse is back to maybe being a TV show again, but that's slowly going through the process. And yeah, when we went to my publisher to say, "Hey, can we do another book?" They were like, "Nah, no thanks." Part of that was because the ideas that I had were a little abstract and a little difficult, and the editor I was working with, Julian, is a brilliant storytelling technician, but I don't think that we hooked. We were simpatico in terms of like that abstract thinking of how to think about the story. So I was kind of out to sea for a little bit, and so I had my little dark night of the soul, and I got really upset for like a week or two, and I was like, I'm going to quit and go get a grown up job again. And then I was like, no, I'm going to write this Assassin's book because, this is the one that I want to write right now. And I wrote that book in like 5 months. Like I tore through it. I was having so much fun. And I sent it to my agent. And he's like, oh my God, like, this is great. Like, I think we're going to be okay. And I'm like, yeah, man, probably not, but whatever, just see what happens. And again, we went to auction and it got preempted. So I feel like I had a bit of a Lazarus moment there.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, you had mentioned to me before. I mean, it's essentially so. This is Putnam, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
Putnam essentially falls under Penguin Random House,
Yep. Same publisher that
which had
dropped me,
published your
which
other
I love.
books. So I remember that there was like the editor really who bought it really had to fight because again, sometimes acquisitions they might be like, well, you know what I mean? Like so like it was even that was kind of, not necessarily a certainty, correct? Or am I misremembering
I
that?
it wasn't a knockdown drag out fight, but they had to make the case, and
Yeah.
I think what they did was that they pitched it as a pivot book. They were like, "Oh, Rob's trying something different. This is a totally different world, a totally different voice, and we really think we can position this." And so they had to build a little bit of a narrative in order to make the case that it would be a good idea, but they did, and they were on board, and it seems to be going pretty well. So
Yeah. So this first book, for what was published and that initial draft that you showed your agent and what got shopped around, was it essentially the same, or were like there any changes through the editing process?
I mean, I edit pretty heavily myself. I I don't get a ton of notes from agents and editors because I work things over like pretty hard before I send them in. And so there were a couple of tweaks and changes. I don't think my agent had any edits for me on it. And then Mark Tavani, who was the editor who bought it, did have a few, but they were pretty basic.
Yeah.
So we moved through that process pretty quickly. So yeah, I'm very hard on myself in the editorial stage.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that before we move on to the books. How many? I know, well, like, so with your first draft, do you do kind of like I don't know, like the Nora, like I I always feel like it's hard to do, but usually you have to always accept the fact that a first draft is going to suck. Like kind of like the Nora
Yeah,
Roberts vomit draft. You just want to kind of get it out because I feel like sometimes writers get, into that thing where it's like, "Oh, I really want to make this first draft to be as perfect as possible." And then they end up kind of like just revising the first couple chapters forever. I mean, so like for you that, and we talked a little bit about, process, but like when you're actually drafting a novel, do you try to like write a certain amount every day? Or I mean, and again, I know like, Walter Mosley has always talked about how like writing isn't necessarily always just sitting down and like, typing or whatever else. It's like thinking about the book. It's like, thinking about
yeah,
the plot,
yeah.
thinking about the characters. So you might actually go a day or two without actually, typing like a chapter or whatever, but you're still working on it, which is something I always have to like explain to my wife when she's just like, why aren't you writing? It's like, I'm thinking about stuff like, I mean, it's more
Yeah.
than that. So, but like the actual like drafting, when you mentioned like 5 months to like get the draft, like how many drafts does that typically go through? I mean, do you try to like do a couple drafts before you show it to anybody, or like how's that process?
Usually and look, like I had that hammered into me really early when I first started learning how to do this, that your first draft is going to be garbage. So I just accept that. Like I never worry about that. I know that I can go back and fix it. And I've gotten to a point now where, the hardest part for me is that creating something out of nothing. It's getting words on the page. And I feel like that is just miserable. It's like pushing a rock up a hill and the rock is also on fire. But when I get to the point that the first draft is done, it's like something in my brain switches and it's like, oh, now I'm editing. Like now this is where the real fun begins. And I'll usually do like three or four editorial passes on something, starting micro and then going macro. And I'll keep like a little notepad next to me to like write down like, okay, I need to think about this. I need to go back and do this because I like momentum. I like working in large chunks. I find that like, yeah, if you start going back and start revising and start fixing, you end up in a death spiral. So anything that I could do to work momentum into the process is going to be good for me.
And so for this novel, it's all first person, present tense from our main character, Mark's point of view. But then you switch it up when you go to book two. And from what I can tell, I haven't had a chance to get book three yet, but from the look on side of Amazon, it's kind of like the same type of, you basically bring in another point of view, Astrid. Like at what point, you know what I mean? Like, was that always the plan, or was that one of those things like, initially book two was all going to be Mark, and then you realize, oh, we want to, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, it's always interesting to me, especially when we look at like series novels where like all of a sudden something switches up, like, like The Killing Floor was first person, and all of a sudden, like Die Trying comes out as the second Reacher novel, and it's in third person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, like, what was that process like in terms of kind of like switching up a little bit of the format? In fact, even I mean, quite honestly, even for a thriller, there's like how many chapters in this was like, you know, for a 300-page novel, there's like 12 chapters, as opposed to
Something like that.
I feel like this, we have a lot more, they're not necessarily chapter headers, but there's a lot more breaks and everything
Yeah.
else throughout.
Yeah. It was funny. And again, the same thing with New York. I was writing Assassins and I was like, this is it. This is the last book I'm ever going to write because every book is the last book I'm ever going to write. And then when Putnam signed me to a two-book deal, we started talking about, okay, do we do another standalone or do we do a sequel? And there was excitement about a sequel. And the format of the stories, which is you've got all these assassins in a 12-step recovery program, makes it really easy to move the camera to someone else to see their trauma and what brought them there and what they went through. So like right off the bat, I knew that I wanted to expand the POV a little bit, but then I realized I painted myself into a corner a little bit because I've got weird things in my head about consistency. So for Assassins, I've got, it's first person present, but Assassins is told on two timelines. It's the present and the past. Like you're getting flashback chapters of what Mark, like his career as the Pale Horse, as this like, Uber hitman. And I was like, well, I'm going to do them in first person present too, because that just is going to make them more visceral and feel more immediate. And that's just the voice. So by the time I got to the third book, I'm like, well, now I've got to introduce not only Astrid, but also flashbacks for her so we can see what her story is. So I said, I'm just going to do all of it, all three, like Mark, Astrid present, and Astrid past in first person present. And I was like, maybe I should ask my editor if I should or should not do this. And then I was like, no, this is definitely going to be one of those like forgiveness, not permission moments because she's going to tell me it's a bad idea. But I think I can pull it off. So I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And it worked. So, I mean, or at least no one's ever complained about it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the third book is the same. It's Mark and Astrid. It's all present. There's no flashbacks, but still first person present. And my editor Daphne is really good. Where she'll always pick up on these little points where she's like, "Hey, in this moment, I forgot which character we were on. So just like make sure you're making that clear." So like sometimes it takes a little bit of tweaking here and there to modulate the voice, but overall, I think I've got their voices different enough that you can kind of tell who you're reading based on, how they're reacting to things.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, besides just the actual voice of those different characters, do you do anything? Do you try to like consciously do anything differently in terms of like maybe sentence structure or like tone to kind of also keep those sections a little bit separate?
Not so much structure, but definitely in tone. Whereas Mark is he's kind of goofy. Like he's this really sweet dude who's like kind of funny, and sometimes he makes like dad jokes, and he's like a movie geek, and you wouldn't necessarily peg him as like the world's deadliest killer, and that was the point. Is I wanted him to be sort of like a very average guy, and then you find out like, oh wait, no, you're anything but average. Whereas Astrid is way more guarded and way more acerbic, and she can be funny too, but she is much harsher than Mark is.
Yeah. So how do you keep track at this point? Like when you were working on your very first series, were you creating sort of like a Bible or like, to make sure that you keep all your characters straight? Like when you get to, if you get to like a book seven in this series, that you make sure like you don't have like a secondary or tertiary character name somebody that like was in book two. This, you know what I mean? Do you do anything to try to like make sure that you're not overlapping characters or like plots or anything like that, when it
Oh
comes to a
no,
series?
nothing whatsoever. I'm way too lazy to do that. I'm sure. I'm sure there's definitely things I've copied for myself or mistakes I've made or logical inconsistencies. I think for the most part, I'm pretty good about keeping a lot of it in my head. I feel like I'm getting to a point of critical mass. I just sent in the fourth Assassin's book. And so, if we go beyond this, I might need to start going back and checking things. But I also, I'm always trying not to be too reliant on the past stuff because you want people to be able to pick up any book in the series and still have a good time with it, which I tried to do with every installment.
Yeah. It might help you or not, I don't know, but I had heard that Mark Greaney, the publisher always it gives you a PDF of the layout of the hardcover or whatever. He just compiles all like every time he gets a new PDF, he just puts it into one huge file. So if need be, he can just do a quick find of, the manuscripts.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, I have them all. I have a file system set up where every book has its own folder and every folder has like a PDF of the book. So I've done that before where I've had to go back and like check something real quick just to be sure of consistency. But
Yeah.
more often than not, I found that I can trust my gut on what I'm doing.
Before we talk about a few other things, let's talk about the third book, which just came out this past Tuesday, Three Hitmen and a Baby.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this third book? Well, where do we find Mark?
So this is also a dual POV with Mark and Astrid, and so there's another member of the group, Valencia, who has a daughter, Lucia. And at this point in the series, Lucia is a toddler. She's like 2 or 3 years old. And Valencia has to go do something in LA and she needs to leave Lucia with someone. And she's not feeling great about it. Because like the first time, like I remember the first time I dropped my daughter off at daycare, I had a meltdown. It's like you're trusting someone else to care for your child. It's a scary thing. So Mark and Astrid and Booker kind of stick their hands in the air and they're like, hey, like, we're three of the most capable people on the planet. Like we can care for this child. And then like spoiler alert, like everything goes wrong. Because of course it does. And it's not ineptness. It's just that there are things that they're not prepared for. And there are things that they didn't consider. Where essentially Lucia spikes a really high fever and they were like, shit, this is dangerous. They take her to urgent care and they realize like, oh, wait a second, like we have fabricated identities. Like we don't actually know Lucia's last name. And this looks really dicey. And so the staff rightfully flags it and, calls the cops. And then it turns into like, they're trying to protect Lucia until Valencia gets back and can sort things out. And then Mark also has something from his past come back that he has to contend with. So it's these kind of dual storylines where they're on the run from the NYPD and the Russian mob and kind of like running around New York City trying to make everything right.
And of course, the title, Three Hitmen and a Baby, plays off the movie. What year did that come out? God, it was not the 90s, right?
Yes, maybe he was older. I don't remember. It was directed by
Was there any
Leonard Nimoy,
pushback when you
which is kind of
suggested that
cool.
title?
No, they loved it.
What has your
I
ratio been with all your books in terms of titles? Were there any times where the publisher was basically like, no, we're going to call it this instead?
I no, I've never had a publisher try to change my title, and I would feel like weirdly, I would feel very angry if a publisher said, no, we're going to retitle it on you, unless they made like a really good case for why they needed to do that. But yeah, they were very down with this and no problems whatsoever. So
Cool. And so you've done, we mentioned before about Alex Segura. You guys did uh, what was it called? Dark
dark
Star?
space,
Dark Space.
space. Yeah.
That came out. So so it's one thing when you have your own, obviously, your own writing style, your own writing process, but then when you're collaborating with somebody else who might have a completely different process, I mean, how has that been? Obviously, you're very good friends with Alex, but then you've also recently done collaborations with Jeff something.
Jeff Rake. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Rake. So you've done a couple different collaborations. How do you approach those collaborations where, I don't know, like I mean, like I'm assuming it's been different with every single collaboration that you've done.
Yeah, it depends on the person. With Alex, Alex is a phenomenally talented writer who, has a ton of novels under his belt. I mean, we basically kind of came up at the same time doing the same thing, which was like, 5 book PI series at Polis before moving on to bigger publishers. And so we've both got our own styles, but we're also like, journeyman writers where we're used to putting in the time. So we were able to kind of like mesh our styles in a way that fit together. And then with Jeff Rake, he was the creator and showrunner of the TV show Manifest. So he's a TV guy. He was less comfortable with the novel writing format. So with that, I was doing for the first book, I was doing more of the prose work and sending it to him and him like tweaking things or changing things. I mean, this is after we spent like 2 months breaking the story and coming up with like a Bible for it. But for the second book, he felt more confidence. So the second book comes out this coming January. But at that point, he was like, "Oh, hey, like I want to give this a shot." So he worked on he did some of the prose writing and did a fantastic job. So it's always a different and a growing process with everyone. My favorite thing about the collaboration with Alex is that we have a dual POV in that, and it's a pilot, Jose Carrillis, who is piloting a ship, and Timothy Corin, who is a kind of like a spy on a moon base, because it's basically like if John Le Carre was writing Star Trek. And there were people who would come up to us and try to guess, like, well, you wrote this character and you wrote this character. And they were always wrong because we both wrote both characters because neither of us wanted to like just take the reins of one and completely surrender the other. So I would do 2 chapters, he would jump in and edit it, and then he would do 2 chapters, then I would jump in and edit, and then do two. So it was basically we were just trading off these 2 characters, and it made me really happy that people couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. So you mentioned before about teaching. Well, when did you get into to teaching?
I've been doing online classes for years, and then over time, so I was teaching online for Lit Reactor, a literary website that is not really around anymore. It got the archives got bought out by Reedsy, so it's still kind of on the web, but it's not. We're not actively doing classes anymore. And I started running their class program for a while, which was really cool. And then I started doing stuff with Writers Digest. They've been great. And then I started working at Seton Hill University. So they have a writing popular fiction MFA. And I myself do not have an MFA, which makes it really hard to teach in that system. But because their system is their program is focused on popular fiction, my resume was enough to get me in. And like I'm not like an adjunct or anything. I'm a mentor. Like I don't even qualify as like a part-time employee, but I love it. It's a low residency program. I go out for a week in January and a week in June, and otherwise I just have writers that I work with who are putting together a thesis novel, and I love teaching. Beyond the fact that it's nice to send the elevator back down, it's nice to work with people who are at the start of their careers, and I can tell them like, hey, just so you know, it's always like this. It's always stressful, and you always feel like it's all going to disappear at any moment. But it sharpens my skill set because there are things that I do intuitively without really thinking about it. But when I have to explain to you why I do it, I understand it better. It puts it in a completely different perspective, you know?
Yeah. What's I've never asked something like this before, so I'm trying to think how best to say it. What is probably one of like when you have a somebody who's new to writing who wants to be a writer, what's like the best advice you could give them, and what would you feel is probably the worst advice for them to get?
I can tell you exactly. The worst advice to get is that you have to write every day. Like there's this people say like, oh, if you want to be a professional writer, you need to write every day or you can't really do it. And I've literally on like three separate occasions, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, wow, like I would really love to be a writer, but I heard this and I can't, like my job is too stressful or my mom is sick or whatever. And it's like, I don't write every day. Like I literally, that's how I make my living. It's my full-time job. And some days I don't want to. Some days I just want to watch TV and play video games. Sometimes I want to take my daughter to a water park. Sometimes I want to hang out with the kids or go see a movie. Like I don't have to do it every day. Like you don't have to either. But people get in their heads that like if you hear a piece of advice and you don't do it like that it's wrong. And we need to move away from rules being set in stone. Like everything is a suggestion. Any piece of advice, even anything that I say, is something that you need to take and you need to turn over and you need to consider. And if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, throw it out. Just go, move on to the next thing. Uh, and I think the biggest mistake that young writers make is wanting to publish more than wanting to write well. And I see this a lot too, where you get to that point, and I get it. Like I get it. Like getting a book published takes forever, and it's so hard, and it's such a frustrating process. And you could work on something for years, and it could go nowhere. And everyone wants to reach that endpoint. They want the thing. They want the thing that they could hold in their hand and say, "I did this," and then show it to people and give it to people, and for people to read it. And that's why we get like vanity presses and self-publishing and I don't personally have anything against self-publishing per se. Like if that's the route that you want to take that route. That's great. But I do think that there are a lot of really unhealthy expectations there. I think a lot of the advocates for it try to sell it as this like, you get to control all your rights and you get to keep all your money and you get to do all this cool stuff. And it's like, but the reality is you're not going to sell those rights and you're not going to make any money. And more often than not, when I've read self-published books, they're usually half-baked and not ready for prime time. And that's why they didn't get picked up by a traditional publisher. And it would have been better to not self-publish it because then what happens is if you self-publish something and you do a shitty job and your ceiling for most people is like 50 to 100 copies, right? Then you write a brilliant book and you get an agent and the agent goes to a publisher and the publisher looks at your numbers and they go, but this book only sold 50 copies, so I don't know if we should roll the dice on this. That can follow you sometimes. So I always tell people like a bad publishing deal or a bad agent is worse than, no publishing deal or no agent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely some because you've had essentially the same agent basically from the very from the warehouse, right?
From the warehouse, yeah, I had an agent previously for the first couple of Ash books, and she was a good starter agent. I was kind of making a lot of those deals. She was just kind of checking the contracts, and then she decided that she didn't want to be an agent anymore. And the guy who ran the agency that she worked for offered to take me on, but I didn't feel like it was a good personality fit. So I kind of just did it on my own for a little bit, and I had planned to reach out to people and start querying, and then Josh Getzler reached out to me because he had been out of the publishing game for a long time, and then he was getting back in, so he was building a client list, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to go out and get a beer? Like, I hear that you're free right now," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's go talk." And I called up a friend who is like she's fairly prominent right now, but back in the day she was like a shadow figure in the industry, and that she knew everyone and everything, and I called her and I was like, "What do you think? Like, what do you think about this guy?" And she paused for a moment. She goes, "Yeah, do that. That's perfect. That's a perfect fit." So and she was right. He changed my life. So it's been nice to have that consistency. And also, I consider Josh a friend beyond just being my agent. Like I've gone out with like, him and his wife, and we sometimes we just text each other dumb bullshit. And it's fun. I like it.
Yeah. So all right. So the last thing I want to ask is always, is there anything you've read, listened to, watched that you really enjoy that you would recommend to other people?
Oh man, just last night I finished the TV show Banshee, which I loved. That was such a great little crime show.
I've been meaning to
Um,
watch that. Is it like does it end well, or is it one of those things where it's like, oh, we thought we were going to get another season, it just ends? You know what I
no,
mean?
they have an ending in mind,
Okay,
and
good.
there were things I liked about the ending. There were things that I wasn't thrilled about the ending. I think overall it was satisfying. I definitely it's one of those shows where I think it finds its voice like halfway through the first season. The first couple of episodes are like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool, but then like once it hits, it's like I ended up staying up later than I intended last night to finish it because I just had the one episode left, and it does that. There were so many weird little quirky things about it that I'm such a big fan of in crime fiction. When you've got like a weird side character who just shows up for a little side quest, and just really great ensemble and great charming little series. So yeah, highly, highly, highly recommend that.
Good. What about any books? Anything recently you've read? Anything coming up? Maybe you wrote a blurb that you want to make people aware
Oh
of?
man, I just finished reading Hillary Davidson's new book, Every Lie I Told, because we did an event for that the other night, and that was fantastic. Yeah, I feel like my reading time has been kind of compromised lately because I've been like trying to catch up on a bunch of stuff, and then like the kids are they're so needy. Kids are too needy. But yeah, there's a couple of books that I have coming up that I have to blurb that I'm pretty excited about. There's one in particular. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Um, it's a book by Adam Frost. I don't remember. It's
Oh,
like
Adam,
the
yeah, it's something dads. It's yes,
like the
because
Bad
Adam
News
told me
Dads
about it.
Club or
It's
something.
yes. Bad News
Yeah,
Dads, yes.
yeah, and that looks really really awesome. I'm excited for that. And then I'm also the event that I'm doing with Ron Curry, which I've never read Ron before, and I've had so many people recently tell me he's amazing. So I'm excited to read his new one too.
Yeah, let's talk about this. You have, I think you said two upcoming events at least, right?
Yeah, July 7th, I'm going to be at the Mysterious Bookshop. Ron's book is coming out. I think we have the same editor, so she asked me to do like an in conversation thing, which happy to do it. And then Jennifer Pashley has a new book out with Mulholland that on July 9th, we're going to be at Thriller-Delphia down in Philadelphia. And yeah, those are going to be some fun little events. And then later in the month, I'm doing the Writers Digest conference. I'm doing some like lectures there, and that's in like Brunswick, New Jersey, or something.
How long has it been out of New York? The last time I was asked to be on a panel years and years and years ago, it was in the city, but they don't do it in the city anymore, do they?
It was last year. It was in Baltimore in like this really
Mm.
weird haunted maritime hotel. It was super creepy. It was awesome. The year before that, it was in New York, I think. I think. But yeah, so the Baltimore one was like it was bizarre. It was just this giant convention hotel that was like on the outskirts of the city. Definitely haunted. There was like World War II propaganda posters everywhere and like models of ships and but this really bomb cafeteria where like you could eat for free and the food was amazing because I guess like they do a lot of like naval training stuff down there.
Hmm.
So and I forget how this happened, but I think like they were supposed to put us in a room that didn't work out, so they ended up upgrading me and my wife to this like really gorgeous suite, like the party suite. It was like two bedrooms and a giant living room and a kitchen. Kitchen didn't have anything in it, but it was still kind of cool to have a kitchen. It was such a bizarre place. It was but it was one of those places that you just like, yeah, you just want to walk around and explore all day. And yeah, so this year it's going to be down in New Brunswick.
All right. So the new book, and people want to stalk you online. Where's the best way to do that?
Sure, my website is Rob W. Hart, where you can find all the pertinent links, but mostly I'm on Instagram at Rob W. Hart one, and I have a Substack at, Substack Rob W. Hart, whatever.com something.
All right. All right, Rob. So the new book is, do you actually have a copy of it? I should have asked you before we started. Do you have a copy
Oh,
handy?
I actually do.
There you
Three men and a
go.
baby.
Three men or three hitmen and a baby, of course. Yep.
Yep.
So that is literally just came out. So it's on bookshelves now. Everyone go buy that. Go buy the rest of the books in the series. Can you tell us, is there anything you can tell us about, like book four? Any little
Yeah,
sneak peek?
yeah. So book four is it's called City of Killers, and it is set in Bangkok. And it was a lot of fun to write. Me and my wife got married last September, and then we went to Thailand for our honeymoon. And at right before I left, my editor Daphne was like, hey, we want to do a fourth book. Do you have any ideas? And I was like, no, I do not. This is a problem. I had a few things I was kicking around, but nothing that had really crystallized. And then within 2 days of being in Bangkok, I was like, oh, I got it. I got it. Like I was literally sitting in a noodle shop at like midnight, like typing a synopsis on my phone because I was so excited about it. I sent it to her, went to bed, woke up, and she was like, "This is awesome. Please do this." So that's a fun
And then
one.
as a plus, you were able to write off the honeymoon, right?
I did write off my honeymoon. Yep, that is that.
Absolutely. That's what I tell. If in fact going back to students or whatever else, I feel like there really should also be a publishing kind of like business class. You know what I mean? Like oftentimes writers
Oh
want to like,
yeah,
learn stuff, but like no one really understands the business until it's like all of a sudden you're like, wait, I got to pay how much in taxes? You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things that like no one really talks about that business end. Cause I remember I had my very first really good year and then I got hit with this big tax bill and I was like, wait, what?
I actually I do business classes. I've done it for Writers Digest. I've done it at Seton Hill, where it's like the business of being a writer, and like yeah, all that stuff you got to know in terms of like taxes, write offs, how the money gets paid out. Because yeah, people don't get that. It's wild, and it's you're right. If you're not planning for it, like every time I get a check, I pull out 35% and stick it in another account because it's like that money doesn't exist. That's there to pay taxes. You know.
Yeah.
It's if I just leave it in my regular account, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to spend it, and then I'm going to go to jail for tax evasion. And I would prefer to not do that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the business side is definitely something that is good to talk about more.
Yeah. Well, Rob, I don't want to keep you. I know you're a very busy man. Again, the new book is Three Hitmen and a Baby on bookshelves now. Hardcover, ebook, audiobook. So,
Yep.
yeah, and then again, go check out all of Rob's other books. And yeah, so thanks, man. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks so much for having me.